You all for tuning in to our second session. I guess I'll call them sessions in our In Bloom political education series that Healthy and Free is doing throughout this summer to really be in conversation with different people in the community around our policy priorities. And so we talked about doulas and expanding doula care last time. And tonight we're going to be talking about parenting in the kink community. And so it's 8:30, so late night, kind of well, late night for me, conversation, like after dark type of conversation. And I'm so excited to be in conversation with Corey, Chad, and Jessica tonight. And so for folks who aren't familiar with me, Brianna Perry, she, her pronouns, executive director at Healthy and Free Tennessee. If you're not as familiar with Healthy and Free Tennessee, we are a statewide reproductive justice organization working to build a movement for reproductive justice around across race, gender, and class, and looking at the intersections of the criminalization of pregnancy outcomes as well as the criminalization of parenting. And tonight we are going to get into a topic related to how parents are criminalized. So I'll stop right there and I would love to pass it to you, Corey, just to introduce yourself and say a little more about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Corey Roya, she, her pronouns. I call myself a sexual health grassroots liaison. It's more than an educator. I connect people to resources. I work with different orgs and either official, unofficial. And then I've also been enacting and working in the BDSM kink community publicly, I want to say for the last 5 years, but living the lifestyle probably for almost like 10 years now. So that's my little background on me. Born and raised Nashville, Tennessee.
All right, thank you, Corey. I want to pass it to you next, Chad, to introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us on. My name is Chad, and this is my wife, Jessica. We've been married 15 years. We are previous facility owners, community leaders out in the East Tennessee area. We just became involved in more of the legislative lifestyle issues after our local East Tennessee government came after us and criminalized us. And I think we're going to get more into that. But these days, that's what we do. We fight for all the other families' rights out there that we can.
Yeah. Thank you, Chad. And Jessica, just want to give you also an opportunity to share a little more about yourself, in addition to what Chad shared.
I'm a mom of three and caregiver and born and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. So not too far from here.
Not too far. Well, thank you all so much. It's really going to be a treat for me and also for those tuning in this conversation. Like we've been thinking about it for some time at Healthy and Free. We're like thinking about a conversation last year, and I'm so glad that it's now come to fruition. And I think it's a topic that different folks are wanting to learn more about and aren't aware of, like the criminalization of real surveillance that happens to parents in the kink community. So just to start off, the first question that I wanted to ask you all is if you can just describe your relationship to this topic, parenting in the kink community, and whoever would like to chime in and go first, pass it to the middle.
Corey, we'll let ladies go first.
Okay. Um, so my relationship is coming from like a sexual health educator advocate component to it. I am a parent. I have one child. I'm also public facing in my kink. And I know that's also something that's hard for a lot of parents because there's a lot of stigma and shame that happens. And then those who participate in certain types of BDSM practices like domination, there's fear of working with certain communities or groups. And then like the prostitution laws that are in Nashville around that. So a lot of spaces and places that make it safe to go publicly play, because not everybody can put a whole dungeon in their home when you're raising a whole family. It kind of makes it limiting and stigmatizing when the community perceives, non-kink community perceives what you're doing as bad or demonic or things like that. And thus there's this perception that you're putting your children in harm as well. And so it's just this fine line of like allowing adults autonomy. And it's kind of like for women that Madonna whore complex. You know, once you have a child, your sex life is supposed to be done, cut off, and you're not supposed to have any fantasies, desires. And so it's this weird fine line that I'm noticing for myself. But the kink community is open and accepting. It's often dealing with those outside of the kink community that you have the biggest run-ins with.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that, Corey. I'll pass it to you, Chad and Jessica, to weigh in on your relationship to the topic.
Sure. So our relationship is, back early, 2017. Our daughter came to us and just told us that she felt she was bisexual. And as parents who didn't know much, we started digging into the communities, and that led us through the swinger community, into the kink community, as we grew closer and started finding out about these things and meeting other, couples and parents that were coming, but it was the stigma, as Corey was mentioning, that was keeping everybody kind of, in the dark. And so we saw that there was not a bunch of safe spaces. And so we owned a large piece of property out in Middle Tennessee and decided to open a facility out there with the help of a lot of great people out in the East Tennessee community under their guidance. That led us into a poly relationship for for 3 years almost. It was a shame seeing all the people. And so that's kind of our relationship to the world. It was just so many great people.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank y'all for um just like talking about in that question, like what kind of like this larger experience, but also within it, like y'all's experience, and really appreciate when you were saying, Corey, about like in addition to the stigma, especially we were talking about women and gender oppressed people, where it's like, oh, okay, whoever like is the maybe the birthing parent, you have like a child, your mom, your caregiver, and you can't be a sexual being anymore. And if you have any desire like this, stigmatized. And if you are a part of the kink community, how folks are like, oh, you're putting your children in danger, and how like that's just messed up. And so in there, like also like, okay, I know y'all like, hey, being connected to others and like friends. And some people who like because of the stigma, like they wouldn't like be a part of like an Instagram conversation or be more public. And that's like a real thing that we need to be trying to like unearth and do something about, where folks can't live into their authenticity. So I just like appreciate y'all lifting that up. And that flows into the next question. Y'all have already spoken about some of the challenges overall, but just wanted to see, as y'all think about y'all's parenting, what would you say are some of the challenges that you face as a parent, both within the community and from folks outside of the community? Like I said, I know y'all talked about that a little bit, but just to, share a little more, dig a little deeper. And Chad and Jessica, I can start with y'all.
think it's just being understood. Um, a lot of people don't understand our preferences, the private matters. What am I trying to say?
I mean, just as a husband and wife, your private choices are not something bring to the family room when your kids are around. That's a stigmatism that a lot of the uneducated areas of society think that just because you're a sexual being, that means that your entire family and children are involved in this. And it's unfortunate because some of the most positive things we got to see as facility owners was the connection and people,
Mm,
whether it was a husband and wife, whether it was two partners, it just the power dynamics of a lot of women who have gone through some terrible abuse in their lives,
mhm,
that the kink community gives them back,
mhm,
that ability to be that sexual being with the safety of having the control.
and have
mhm.
a voice that's to be heard. That's
And
Mhm.
what
reclaim.
is like I feel as kink parents, we listen more
Mhm,
and we have less judgmental views.
mhm,
Mhm. Mhm.
mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to pick up on what Chad was talking about, and like what I was also hearing is like the reclamation of like your sexual identity, especially for those who've gone through trauma. I think it makes me think of the two perceptions we have. Something must be wrong with you, like you must have endured a very traumatic experience to want to do that, which could be true. But two things can be true at the same time, or they could not be true altogether. So some people do come into kink through trauma, and kink is a space to heal that trauma. There are certain practices in bigger cities outside of Tennessee that use somatic body practices like sex work as a form of like therapy and body work to work through some of that trauma. Then you also have behavior harm reduction therapy that's done through some kink practices to prevent perpetual harm happening in other spaces. But then you have the people where this is just who I am. No trauma happened. I just like one good way I've heard somebody explain it is like you start with vanilla ice cream. It's a base. Everybody likes vanilla ice cream. It's a base. It's fundamental across the board. Now, if you don't like vanilla ice cream, you add a little something to make it chocolate, or you add a little something to make it strawberry. And through the additional layers to perfect what you like for your ice cream, sprinkles, nuts, whipped cream, all of those different varieties are just a preference that you have of enjoyment and fulfillment and satisfaction. But there is this concept of you must have been traumatized to even like these things versus like, I'm just a bitch that likes a Sunday Express with all the toppings.
There you go. Well, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you for that. And it's reminding me too, just kind of like overall, like um our relationship to our bodies and some of that, like, growing up in the South and religious culture. And I mean also just across the board, like these systems that, impact how like we see ourselves, our right to exist in our body, and like how reclaiming it can be seen as a threat. It could be seen as dangerous.
Yeah.
And there's like, resistance in like their reclamation and like, owning, again, yourself, your authenticity, your desires, your pleasure. And so that's like something like that y'all are saying, it's like making me think of that. And in our work, like, doing reproductive justice work and, that's like, including like birth justice, like abortion, justice work as well. And how it's like, comes down to our bodies, our right to exist in our bodies. And, when we think about, all of that, like one through line, or I think this kind of, uh, we're trying to be more explicit about it's like, okay, pleasure is so central. So, thinking about Audre Lorde's work, but just like other people talked about the importance of pleasure and like how we can experience pleasure in a variety of ways, including sexually and outside of sexual pleasure as well, and how people don't want that, for us,
Yeah.
especially like bodies that have been marginalized. So that's just like a quick reflection that I had. But with this next question, and y'all, again, I've already been speaking to some of the questions I wanted to ask, and I want to pick up actually on something that you said, Jessica, because you're like, hey, like actually, we're better listeners now. We're less judgmental now, and so I am curious how y'all would say being a part of the community has made you a better parent. I know Chad and Jessica, y'all talked about like, hey, it was actually supporting y'all's child, which brought y'all like, by way of that into the community. So like, trying to be good parents, and that's how y'all came into the community in the first place. So yeah, if y'all can just share like some other ways in which being a part of the community has made y'all better parents, and what ways has being a parent made you a better community member? And we can start with you first, Corey.
Yeah, I think like the communication is a big component to it, but also like limits and boundaries, because I think there's the other misconception of kink is that it's a free for all and there's no rules or guidelines. And kink is some of the most safest harm reductive practices that anyone could follow. And I think when you operate in a mindset of dominant submission, power play dynamics, uh you recognize how power plays into a lot of things and how those power dynamics show up. And those power dynamics also show up in adults and children. So, who has control? Who has power? Who determines what happens to their bodily autonomy? But recognizing the same way I have the bodily autonomy to say yes, no, maybe to my body, they have the right to say yes, no, maybe to their body. So then you start teaching safety practices earlier. So we're going to learn proper anatomy so you can communicate to me when there is an issue, comment, or concern to your body. Then there's also the ability to harm reduction and stranger danger. And like when we talk about that, and like just because you know this person or you enjoy this person's company does not give them the consent to touch you in a way that you don't deem appropriate, whether that's a hug, whether that's a handshake. So starting the boundaries small help me teach my child how to have bodily autonomy to protect herself, but also to advocate for herself and be able to clearly distinguish needs, comments, and concerns about her own body. That ultimately, I feel like in Southern purity culture, we don't get, because we still call in vulvas pocketbooks and penises PPs. So if we can't properly name and discuss and have honest conversations about our bodies, then we can't even deal with all the other stuff.
Mm, mm. Yeah, thank you for that. Jessica and Chad, yeah, what else would y'all say? What ways, other ways, being a part of the community has supported your parents and made you better parents?
Well, I think Corey nailed most of them out of the park. I mean, besides being, accepting, being able to communicate because of those limits and boundaries that you learn through the lifestyles and the communities, connecting, being more physical, providing those hugs that we get away from in a busy world.
Mm-hmm.
Um, going to something Corey was talking about was the Southern culture. I moved to the South because I loved a lot about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but taking a step back, I'm a veteran that was injured serving this country, and I pride myself on allowing everybody to have their rights. And, even here in Tennessee, a lot of the older generation still has their rights to believe the way they do. I may not agree with them, which I personally have my own opinions, which is why I'm here tonight. But there is a disconnect because they aren't up with the evolution that our younger generations are who are sex positive are learning and living their lives by. And so we're automatically bad people. The narrative, that we've talked about a little bit here in the South, it's bad. And I think we got some of the most, I don't know, influx of community members was right around the time the whole, Christian Grey stuff was coming out. We had husband and wives flocking to our facility, and just watching them connect.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that after they got, those sprinkles, as Corey said, on their layers of ice cream, that they didn't go home and find a way to connect emotionally and physically with their children in a better way. And it was an amazing thing.
I
Mm.
want to add something to what Chad said about like the older generation too. That makes me think. It gives me the awareness of what sexual repression will do.
Oh,
So, like recognizing the older generation and the lack of, um, I'm not saying you got to do the things, but just open minded to accept that it's different than you and that's okay. The sexual repression that you see in a lot of people, the stress, the anxiety, the relationships, like Chad is talking about, so many unfulfilled, unsatisfied marriages, and families being torn apart because whether we want to admit it or not, sex does play a part in that. And the beautiful thing about kink, when you got someone who's dealing with perimenopause or erectile dysfunction, there are still ways that you can connect intimately and on a sexual level that don't require penetration. But we've been conditioned as a society to think that sex only involves penetration. So it's hard for people outside of the kink community to comprehend what we're doing when I'm talking about power play dynamics. I'm a busy lady all day. I'm a boss bad bitch. But at home, I want to be a softie. I want the
Right.
soft life. Let me submit. Turn my brain off. I don't want to think about it. You make the decision, Dad. Okay. But during the day, I'm bad bitch. Don't tell me nothing. And we don't recognize that need for an outlet. And sometimes that outlet can be sexual. Sometimes that outlet can be like painting, creative, running. But it's still an outlet that allows you to express yourself through full body. And I
Mm.
think we got to recognize what sexual repression will do to our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
add a little bit more to that. It, when you talk about when you come home and you just want to turn that off because you are a boss all day, that sounds like my wife. And that was part of the narrative of the small town, Southern culture that came after us. Was I was the bad guy. I was forcing her to do all these things
Mhm.
instead of understanding that it was her choice to come home, and she just wanted to let go of all those obligations and all those things,
Mhm.
in parts of our lives. And um, you know, when we started our facility, we reached out to the state. We offered the police who showed up at our front gate several times, hey, look, come in, come walk around, just do me a favor, don't wear your uniform because I want you to see my community. I want you to see what you have a completely different outlook on. Come see, come be, walk around. And although they never took us up on that, it was the narrative of what they thought we were about.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yeah. And with the sexual repression again, going back to Audre Lorde, because I just love that piece, the uses of the erotic.
Mhm.
If folks have not read their essay, it's so good because what y'all are like speaking to just again, like how do I experience pleasure in the multitude of ways that I can experience pleasure? So just like it's just such a good piece. So wanted to flag it and mention it again. So what you just shared, Chad, about like, hey, like you were like y'all can take off y'all uniform, like come in, like, just wanting people to like know and see for themselves. And that relates to this next question around like what y'all would want folks to know about what it's like parenting and being in the kink community. And it can be things that um go to like what you're up against. So going back to that criminalization piece that we like were speaking to briefly in the beginning, like I mentioned that I know of different folks who like, oh, I want to learn more, and they're like, I don't know as much. And one of the things they don't know about is the criminalization piece and how that is real. So it can be that, or it can be other things, like in the vein that you just talked about, Chad. Like, hey, I wanted these police officers to wear something else to come in because I wanted them to know like X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
So yeah, just the next question being around, what do you wish folks knew most about being a parent in the kink community?
You want me to take this one?
Um, I think just from our experience of hosting is um no two scenes were alike, no two children are alike. And
Mm,
just listening to them and finding out how they learn and how to respond. It's just a beautiful thing when you can actually speak to their mind and feel the words they're saying. Um and parent them individually as they are just magical children.
Mhm.
mm,
Yeah, and I'd add a little bit to that. And, you know, I will never forget sitting at our kitchen table one night, probably had 100, people at the facility, and things were going great. I think it was a glow night or something. And I remember sitting there with some of my best friends just saying, you know, the conversation of, well, what are you going to do if they come after you for whatever reason it came up. And I sat there saying, I'm a veteran of this country. I was injured in the line of duty serving my country. There is no way that they would come after me. There's no way. We're okay. And to see the criminalization that they've done based on their education levels of the community
Mhm.
was so hurtful. I mean, they were, here in the state of Tennessee, they're so bold with what they put in the state documents that it's it's out there. Like I'm not going to hide it. I've been threatened with further action if I show these things, but if I don't, it's just to allow them to keep repressing our
mm,
communities. And there was nothing in our case that wasn't attached to some sort of sexual deviant off the wall allegation.
mm,
All 13 of those allegations, which were substantiated before we ever even stepped foot in a courtroom,
mm.
were unsubstantiated before DCS even left our home.
And Chad, for people watching, can you explain the difference between the two?
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for that, Corey.
Sure. And this is something I definitely want to find the right platform to really go into depth with. But an allegation, somebody at work, somebody at church doesn't, think you're doing something the right way. They pick up and call in anonymously. They don't even have to leave a name
Mm,
and say so and so, so and so. And substantiation is we've found, the state says we have found
mhm,
something.
mhm,
um, so both are devastating. We ended up losing our youngest son at the age of 10 via
mhm,
SWAT teams for 11 months. Pure hell. I just put it out there. We lost every backing, every community member, every attachment we had overnight because of the
mhm,
narrative. Nothing more than the narrative that spread like a wildfire, and that hurt. That hurt us
Yeah,
both.
just
mm,
Uh,
just basically on them saying a sex party, that was all the words attached to everything was hosting sex parties and
mm,
just devastated us.
it did, but it has led to people would say, are you sorry that you did it? And I shock people because I'm not sorry I do it, and I would do it again. I just do it a little bit differently because the people in the community and the things that we got to experience with some of the greatest people across the state and surrounding states was something that I don't ever want to give back. But we did lose our child for 11 months of his life and the trauma that he's going through.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
But
y'all too, the trauma that y'all experienced as a result of that. Yeah.
but it's
Mhm.
given us a story and it's given us a way to move forward, and which again has put us up at the the legislature, and trying to get over that narrative that has ingrained itself in a lot of the very far right conservatives up there, to where some of them won't even talk to us just because of the word that their governmental agency, the Department of Children's Services, put in place, which is sex parties, all this stuff.
Mhm.
They won't even open their doors to us. Um, but we're not going to stop. It's time for this to all sit at the table and figure out how do we move forward.
Yeah, and one thing I want to say, and thank you for sharing all that, Chad. I can just only imagine like the ripple effect and how it, is like continues to be ongoing, and this like loss of community and what y'all share like just kind of overnight, and these like ideas, because that's what is comes up for me, like what it means to be a parent and how somebody else defines that, right? And how that goes into like the child welfare system, and which we call the family policing system, because it's policing parents, their behaviors. And again, if you don't like fit this certain mold, then
Yeah.
things come up. Like I and not to say I be like I might be telling on myself, but I watched this Tyler Perry movie. A lot of folks have been talking about it, Straw, on Netflix. But
Mhm.
like it's this struggling single mother, and kind of what unfolds. I thought it was interesting commentary around like what it looks like to be a parent, and like you're a bad parent if you do X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
And you're a good parent if you do X, Y, and Z. But you're so-called a good parent like if you throw your child out because they're trans, because they're queer, and that's not considered like an issue at all. And so it just reminds me how like other people get to define that, and parenting is not like folks aren't like thinking about like care and love and like respect and what that looks like in different like families across different communities. And again, going back to like what we're seeped in so deeply in the South, and how like people like writing legislation and just like different like harmful perspectives, like how it can really lead to like harming people's lives. And that's why like we really want to be like on this like what happens with the family policing system and the criminalization of parents, and how there are many ways family separation happens. Like, I'm glad like, the conversations are happening about like what we see unfolding, and like of course in LA and ICE race. And there's so many ways, so many tentacles to the family policing system. And I think that so many folks like, oh, oh yeah, like of course, like, you can, do what you want if you're in a Kink community, it's cool. But it's like, no, like real challenges, they're real threats, and people are like out here like having to go toe to toe with the child welfare system. So, I say all that to say like what you shared is like real, and I'm so sorry that y'all experienced that, and continue to experience that. But in that, how y'all have built community and advocated for yourselves and stood firmly, right? And like, hey, no, like we're not going to be afraid. So just appreciate that too. Hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we're still working every day. We just finally moved back into a home. We ended up losing our home, just because of the wording and the narrative. Lost veteran benefits. I mean, things that have no place connecting to a
Yeah.
narrative, but the fact that nobody was willing to verify that narrative, just let it keep going. But we're slowly building back our lives. It's been 4 years, and we're getting our footing back under us, and we hope to continue, getting a hold of our community and getting back involved, and just seeing those faces that we miss.
Mm-hmm.
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 Listening to your story, this isn't my answer to the question, but it does make me think about privilege and proximity, because you guys are East Tennessee and I'm Middle Tennessee. So I don't have similar fears because we have 3 clubs here in like a driving distance of me. So being in a metropolitan area, it's more acceptable, and it's just not talked about because there are 3 functioning operating clubs. The shame and the stigma is more that communal level. And so, but I think about if I was rural county and being a Black woman, I couldn't invite the police to come to my establishment and check it out,
It's fair. That's fair.
right? But like that I think emphasizes the policing system and how it's not accurate and it's not fair and it's not just, because it's about proximity and it's about people's personal beliefs and morals and not facts. And how if we were not living in some of these spaces, we wouldn't be having these issues. As well as, but to my answer of the question, I think like one of the things I think about reproductive justice, and I try to hone in on the environment of the child is conducive, and that includes happy parents, And so, if parents are not repressed, if parents are not sexually frustrated, if parents are not upset, bills are always going to happen. Life shit's always going to happen. But if I get to control and bring pleasure and joy in my life in this bubble, and this is my time for me, this ultimately makes me a better human, not just a better parent, but a better human. I have more patience. I've had my meditation. I've been able to release stress and anxiety. And then that helps me show up overall, creating the environment. Because I also think about how many people resent their children and are unhappy that they're forced to parent. And then that adds other layers of trauma on children, but yet we don't criminalize those situations. I'm not saying we should, but it's just like how we view things as a society, kind of what you were talking about with the movie, what's deemed acceptable versus what's deemed unacceptable. My daughter went to school and I got a phone call that she's screaming my big vagina on the playground. And they're like, I know you're a sex educator, but can you talk to her about talking about her private parts? You mean her genitals? And then constantly have to like tell other people, like, okay, we can talk about consent and we can talk about respecting other boundaries, and that when you're in public spaces, other people may not consent to the behaviors, actions, and thoughts that you want. However, we're not going to repress language, and we're not going to so it's more like those personal, smaller agitations that happen and pushback that I feel. And I just wish that people would recognize, like, baby, go bust the nut. Just go take care of yourself. Go do some power exchange. Go get tied up. Whatever you deem as a release for you that allows you that subspace or dom space, which allows you to disengage but be in a meditative space. It helps you overall, that the whole environment that you show up allows you to be a better human being. And I think that ties into like reproductive justice of bodily autonomy and the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say to your points, Corey, before 2017, when we, went searching for information, even as a married couple, we did not have the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
The community and these safe spaces and areas taught us how to connect, how to go in and do all these things as a couple or as partners, to learn all that, because we were seeing it. And I mean, if you go to an event, they want you to watch most of the time. You'll come learn, whether it's a class, whether it's a scene. And that's what I loved most, was watching new couples, new partners come in and their eyes get this big,
Mm-hmm.
their faces are red and they're wanting to run out. And we're saying, guys, they want you. Just sit down and watch. And they'd come back the next week or whatever and be like, man, what we did when we get home, it was amazing, and we feel closer now. And it was just the education of people really through those things.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Thank y'all so much for sharing that. There's so many gems in there, and I'm so glad we're recording it because I was like, I'm just okay.
It's
Corey
all
said
right.
this, Chad said this, Jessica said this. I want to like come back to it. And so yeah, I'm so glad that we're recording it. So we have one more question, but also like open it up if there were things that we didn't cover that you want to uplift. But this last question, well, it's a two-in-one question, like a two-parter. Y'all have mentioned like supports, I would say broadly, but curious what resources you want to uplift that exist or resources that you wish existed for parents in the kink community. And the second part of that question is the learning piece that you ended on, Chad. Where can people go if they want to learn more about this topic? Just more about kink in general as well. So just yeah, I want to see like what resources exist, resources you wish existed, and where can people go to learn more. Folks, watching this live and just in general as folks are sharing information.
Well, I'd say let's start with what did I wish existed.
Mm,
In 2021, when all this took place, man, I really couldn't find much of anything. I mean, I was Google was on fire, and I was typing, wearing my keyboard out. I don't know if I just wasn't typing the right things in, but I had gone all over the place, and NCSF was about the only place that I could get any information. And you know, I look back on it now, and they gave me the best that they could at that time. Um, but legal stuff, not legal advice, but legal kind of guidance, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
counseling, more, more community, counseling things. Um, there just wasn't anything really available. So
mm,
more of just support services, and as
mhm.
more things come up, like Healthy and Free Tennessee, which I've personally witnessed, and congratulations on the bill this year on the
Poverty is not neglect.
yeah. And
Mhm, mhm,
I got to watch that happen, and it's just communities and organizations and nations willing to step up, and so just more of those coming. And I'm gonna ask her, but I think Corey's going to be the one for where to go these days, because we have been out of the community for quite a while. But what do you wish was up?
I wish more therapists would
mm,
acknowledge their open-mindedness. It's hard to find on like psychology today, but my therapist is very open-minded to it, and the last one I had was too. And I think just finding someone to talk to and support. We hosted a family event, and having that connection that we had the whole family there, but no lifestyle mention, but
Mm-hmm.
just having those friendships
mm,
that I've seen develop from that event that are still here today are just wonderful.
mm,
Mm-hmm.
mhm, mhm.
I
Yeah. Sorry.
think like modern day resources, current, up to date. I still think the NCSF, the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, is still a good resource. They're constantly updating their stuff. Uh,
Mm,
they have PDF resources, what to do. But I do agree we do need more than that. The issue is because it's still taboo. And in Tennessee, at the time when I was coming up doing my sexual attitude reassessment training, we only had one Black sexual health ethical non-monogamous therapist for the whole state of Tennessee.
Oh.
And so
Mm.
she did training in kink, she did training in ethical non-monogamy, and then she also was like a clinical licensed therapist on top of that. And because of the work I was doing with her by getting my sexual attitude reassessment training and stuff like that, I couldn't see that person as a therapist. So
Mm.
that limits my pool of who can I go to for myself for therapy, community, and understanding when there's one person for the whole state of Tennessee. And now things have grown. People are going and getting their sex backgrounds, and educators, people are starting to understand the intersectionality of it. But I think the bigger thing is like being able to bring kink to light, you know, and recognizing like, yes, there are harmful things that happen in the kink community, but that's not because of kinksters. That's because of harmful people. The same way we talk about other people and other crimes that happen, and how there are extremists in any group or organization, and that you still have to vet, you know, you still have to verify, and you still have to connect. And I wish that there was a way digitally to vet people in a transformative justice way and not a petty way. Because sometimes what can happen is people get on these online forums and say, so and so is not a safe person. These people enacted harm, but there's no base, there's no validity. And it's because you done told them no, you don't want to have a threesome with them because you don't agree with their ethical practices. And now you the bad person, but there's no backing. Everything's on, you know, FetLife. It's on the back pages. So there's no true verification.
Right.
Um,
Mm.
and so like right now, especially like for Black communities, like kink has always been white people stuff. And now Black communities are saying, no, we've been here a little bit. We just been a little more quiet. And we're trying to like build that community slowly because it is like a trust word of mouth type of thing. You
Yeah.
don't have big organizations for like how you can go get a parenting class, how you can go and get a sexual health education course, or how you can go and get just anything really in regard. But this one thing, there's limited resources, there's limited access, there's limited knowledge, and it's very grassroots, it's very communal.
Mm.
And there needs to be more of a open public forum that allows that conversation to bring safety, because I do believe that when there's secrecy, when there's darkness, when there's unclarity, and people are allowed to move in those spaces, you
Yeah. It kind of breeds that stuff. Like the conditions that we talk about transform justice, which what are the conditions that allow for this, whatever it is, harm to happen in the first
to the
place?
light, and it's recognized as a part of normal sexual human expression, then we get to say more publicly, this person is not safe. This action or behavior is not safe. And this is why, because these are the legal or the formal documents that state this is the safety practices, and what you're seeing over there, that's not kink, but this is kink. We don't
Mm,
have that formality.
yeah. Thank you for that. And the resources that y'all mentioned, we'll like make sure that like they'll be in the comments, and any like follow up that we do. Yeah, so I just like took in so much, soaked up all that y'all said. I really appreciate y'all being in conversation with me, but also being in community. Like y'all are like connected to Healthy and Free's work, and we also, want to pour into y'all, invest in y'all, and all the ways that we can. So as y'all, that's like one thing that I feel like kept coming back up, like connection and community,
Mhm.
and the importance of that. And so, as we have had this conversation, that's something that we want to like, highlight, underline, and make sure it's clear. And yeah, just like really appreciate like this like y'all's work and advocacy and modeling like what it looks like to embody all of these things and like just being courageous and authentic. So I just really appreciate that. And I want to just see if there's like one thing you want to leave our like supporters with people who are tuning in. Just one thing you want to say before we close out. Now, just open it up. One thing you want to leave folks with.
Go first.
I'll let you go.
I think I can speak on behalf of Jessica's. We miss our community. We love our community. So if you were a part of our community and you heard things, just know that we still love you. We miss you, and we hope to see you soon.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Um, I think just that there's real beauty in like letting go of like what society puts on us of how we should be living, and recognizing that the systems in place, like the family, um, as you call it, policing system, is really here to police us, and that the more we lean into harm reduction and awareness and transformative justice and conflict resolution, that trickle down effect impacts our personal lives and our sexual lives, and that community care will really help alleviate a lot of that. And one more resource I just thought about was Jet Set and Jasmine and King Noire. They are a couple in Miami, and Jet Set and Jasmine is a licensed, I think, psychologist, but she specializes in working with sex workers and people who are of the lifestyle and community, and runs a whole sex positive parenting group. And
Hmm.
she helps people, like she's based in Miami, but they have groups, they travel, and she has online forums. But with her licensing, with her PhD and all her resources, she really helps bring the legitimization to this world that a lot of people are trying to, like what Chad and Jessica are talking about. Like, there is harm, but there's also a beautiful community, and there's the ability, like she talks about her kids are all valedictorians and all these great aspirations that they uphold because her being a better parent and trusting herself and her desires helps her parent her children better. So I just want to leave people with that resource too: Jet Set and Jasmine and King Noir, and decolonizing sex.
Mm, thank you for that. And I'm assuming like those are the Instagram pages
Yeah.
that folks can follow. Okay. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, we definitely will be interested in bringing you all back to have a part two. Again, thank y'all so much for all that y'all shared. For being well, maybe this is not being up late. I don't know, folks' bedtime. I'm a grandma, so I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to sleep after this. And I, know like y'all have families, and so just taking an hour to like be in conversation with me and maybe like away from your children for a little bit. We're so grateful, and so thank you so much for what you shared. Thank you to those who tuned in, and yeah, we'll be connecting soon. And to our supporters, just be on the lookout for the next political education conversation we're going to be doing later this month, and we'll be sending out information on our listserv, and then also you can check it out here on our Instagram, Healthy Free TN. So thank you all, and have a good night.
Good night.